My name is Marissa Holloway, and I'll never forget the sound of the courtroom door slamming shut behind my parents the day the judge issued a permanent restraining order. I watched as my mother's smug face twisted into disbelief while I calmly handed her the footage, her voice on the phone call that falsely accused me of endangering my own child. Some betrayals burn quietly, others explode. Mine, it began with cupcakes, candles, and an empty living room. Before I start this story, tell me where you're watching from. Drop it in the comments below. If you've ever felt abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love you the most, you're not alone. That night, Denver's early spring cold seeped through the window panes like a warning. I'd spent all week getting things ready for Eli's birthday. My baby, 4 years old today. There were dinosaur-themed cupcakes on the coffee table, handmade party hats he and I colored together, and a big balloon arch from the dollar store that I'd wrestled into shape during his nap. I even dug out the old camcorder to record the moment Grandma and Grandpa walked through the door and Eli ran into their arms. Except that door never opened. "Mommy, is Grandma stuck in traffic?" Eli asked, his voice full of hope, sticky fingers clutching his green cupcake. "Maybe, honey," I lied. "Let's wait a few more minutes, okay?" I glanced at the clock. 5:17 p.m., then 5:43, then 6:12. By 6:30 the frosting had started to crust and the candles stood unlit, untouched. I pressed a trembling hand to my chest and picked up my phone. I didn't want to call. I still thought maybe they'd surprise him, walk in laughing with balloons. But my gut already knew. It rang twice before my mom answered. "Hi Ma, where are you guys?" My voice cracked despite my best efforts. "Eli's waiting for you. He keeps asking for Grandma." From the background, I heard my father's voice, sharp and impatient. "Tell her to stop making drama. We're tired of her always needing something." I froze. "Marissa," my mother said, her voice clipped, "we thought you understood. After last time." "Last time," I whispered, my throat dry. There was a pause, then a click. They hung up. I stood there, my hand still clutching the phone, my feet numb on the hardwood floor. My son, still in his little crown, tugged at my sweater. "Mommy, are they coming?" I knelt, pulled him close, and buried my face in his soft curls. "No, baby," I said softly. "But it's okay, you have me, always." We sat together in the flickering light of the birthday candles I finally lit just for him, the cupcakes untouched by anyone else. When I kissed him goodnight, he whispered, "I still love Grandma." And I whispered back, "I know, baby, but I'll make sure you never have to wonder who really shows up." And in that moment I made a quiet promise to myself. This would not be the childhood he remembered. Not this. It had been 7 days since Eli's birthday. 7 long days of silence. No call, no text. No "sorry we missed it." Just a hollow, echoing absence where my family used to be. At first I told myself to be patient. Maybe something had come up. Maybe someone had gotten sick. Maybe, just maybe, my father's outburst had been a moment of weakness, not a declaration. But by day 3 I stopped making excuses. I deleted the leftover cupcakes, tossed the balloons, even threw away the crayon-streaked birthday hats Eli had been so proud of. Watching his little face fall each time he asked if Grandma would come tomorrow was a special kind of heartbreak. So I did what moms do. I wrapped the pain in chores. I vacuumed, mopped, and reorganized the pantry until I didn't feel like I was coming apart at the seams. Eli and I had popcorn on the couch and watched dinosaur documentaries, just the two of us. He didn't know the silence in the house was unnatural. But I did. And still, I told myself maybe they'll call. That illusion shattered at 10:14 a.m. the following Monday, with a single, chirpy ping from my phone. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a mug of lukewarm coffee, trying to respond to client emails while Eli doodled stick figures with ferocious concentration. The message was from my mother. "Send your brother $2,500 for his rest. He's been working nonstop. It's taking a toll." No greeting. No acknowledgement of the week of silence. No mention of Eli or his birthday, just that. I stared at the message, rereading it like maybe, just maybe, I'd misunderstood. But it said exactly what I thought it did. They skipped my son's 4th birthday, called me dramatic, hung up on me, and now they wanted money for my brother's rest. I almost laughed. My brother, Caleb, the golden child with the permanent safety net. The same man who, when I was struggling to pay for Eli's daycare while waitressing nights, told me to ask the government or something. The same man who'd lived with our parents rent-free for almost 5 years while he figured things out. Now he needed rest and I was supposed to fund it. My hands trembled as I opened the banking app. Not with grief this time, but rage. That deep, slow kind of fury that builds after years of being overlooked, dismissed, and used. I typed in Caleb's account number, I transferred $3, and in the memo line I wrote, "Let him rest on the couch, that's what he gave me." The moment I hit send, a strange calm washed over me. Not power, not triumph, just clarity. I sat back in the chair and stared at the kitchen wall, the ticking of the clock suddenly very loud. Eli was humming to himself, his crayons scattered everywhere. I picked up my coffee. It was cold, I didn't care. Out loud, more to the silence than anyone, I muttered, "That's all he ever gave me when I needed help." The words tasted bitter but honest. I hadn't asked them for much. Not when Eli's dad left. Not when I was holding 2 jobs and falling asleep at red lights. Not even when Eli had the flu and I needed anyone to bring over cough syrup at midnight. But Caleb, he needed to rest. And for some reason, that was worth more to them than Eli turning 4. I leaned over and kissed my son's head. "We're gonna be okay, kiddo." He didn't look up, just kept coloring, but I meant it. For the first time in a long while, I meant it. It was raining the next morning when I strapped Eli into his car seat. I hadn't planned it. There was no grand strategy, no rehearsed speech in the mirror. But when I saw the message still sitting unread in our family group chat, Eli's birthday photo, the one I'd sent a week ago with the hopeful caption, "He's been waiting for you all day," I just grabbed my keys. Eli was quiet during the drive, watching water bead across the window. I caught glimpses of his reflection in the rearview mirror. He looked so much like me, same dark eyes, same slightly upturned nose, but more hopeful. Still untouched. I wasn't going to let them steal that from him. The house looked the same as always, neatly trimmed lawn, a little faded American flag hanging from the porch. Comfortable, safe-looking, it was neither. I rang the bell, no answer, so I opened the door and walked in, still had a key. "Mom," I called out. My voice echoed more than I expected. "Dad," they were in the living room. My mother was folding laundry. My father sat in his recliner, newspaper in hand, casual, like nothing had happened. My mother looked up and immediately rolled her eyes. "Oh, so you've come to cause more drama." I stepped forward, placing my hand gently on Eli's shoulder. He clutched my leg, silently taking it all in. "Drama," I said, keeping my tone even. "I dropped by because apparently you forgot your grandson's birthday." My mother tossed a towel onto the couch. "We didn't forget. We chose not to participate in the guilt circus you set up." "Guilt circus?" I repeated. "You mean the cupcakes and handmade hats? The call I made where your husband told me I always need something." My father turned a page of his paper with exaggerated nonchalance. "You do," I blinked. "I do what?" "You always make everything about you," he said without looking at me. "It was Eli's birthday and yet somehow you used it to create a pity performance. We didn't want to be a part of that." My jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. "You didn't call, you didn't text. You couldn't even lie and say, 'Happy birthday' for his sake." "He's 4, my mother said flatly. "He won't remember." I glanced down at Eli. He wasn't crying, just watching, his little fingers still gripping my jeans. "I remember," I said, voice now shaking despite my best effort. "I remember every birthday you spent hours making Caleb's cake from scratch, the scavenger hunts, the camcorder, the banners, but for Eli, nothing. Not even a $5 card from Walgreens." "You're being overly emotional," my father mumbled. I stepped closer. "You called me cruel in a text because I sent Caleb $3, after you asked for $2,500 so he could rest." My mother raised an eyebrow. "That was unnecessary, Marissa. He's exhausted. He's had a hard year." "He's 33 and still lives in your basement." Her face darkened. "He has anxiety." I stared at her stunned. "And I don't. You know what it feels like raising a child alone, working 2 jobs, and still getting ignored by the people who are supposed to help you." "You never asked," my father muttered again, flipping his page like punctuation. "Yes, I did," I snapped, finally losing the edge of my composure. "I asked for help with daycare once. Caleb told me to call the state. You told me to budget better." "You always have a tone, Marissa," my mother said coolly. "That's your problem. People don't like being made to feel like failures." I laughed once, bitter and low. "No, you just don't like being held accountable." Eli tugged on my coat. "Can we go home now?" My heart dropped. "Yes, baby," I said softly. "We're going." I looked back at them, my mother now folding again, my father unmoved. "I didn't come here for a fight," I said. I came here for an explanation, but I got exactly what I needed. My mother smirked. Which is? Confirmation, I said, lifting my chin. That Eli and I were better off without this. We walked out without slamming the door. I didn't need to, the silence I left behind said enough. The rain had slowed to a mist by the time I reached the front porch, Eli's small hand still wrapped tightly around mine. I was halfway down the steps when I heard the screen door creak behind us. Marissa, wait. I turned. Danielle stood there, one hand on the doorframe, the other clutching her keys like she'd been debating whether to follow me or stay invisible. My cousin Danielle, my aunt's oldest daughter, the one who always sat quietly at family dinners and left early with polite excuses. I heard everything, she said, her voice low. My first instinct was embarrassment. Then shame. Then the familiar urge to explain myself before anyone asked. I didn't mean to make a scene, I started. Danielle shook her head immediately. Stop, please don't do that, I blinked. Do what? Apologize for reacting to being treated badly, she said, stepping fully onto the porch. You're not crazy, Marissa, they've done this for years. The words hit me harder than my parents' insults ever had. You noticed? I asked quietly. She gave a humorless laugh. How could I not? I stopped coming around because every visit felt like watching the same play. Caleb gets grace. You get lectures. Eli peeked out from behind my leg, studying her face. Danielle crouched down, her expression softening instantly. Hey buddy, I'm Danielle, remember me? He nodded once. Happy birthday, she said gently. I'm really sorry I wasn't there. My throat tightened. Danielle stood and looked back at me. I heard what your mom said about him not remembering. That's not true, and even if it were, it doesn't make it okay. My father's voice drifted faintly from inside the house. Who's out there? Danielle didn't turn around. I remember being 16, she continued, and asking your mom why she always went easier on Caleb. She told me some kids need more support. And the rest of us? I asked, her eyes met mine. We were expected to be grateful for crumbs. Silence settled between us, not awkward, not heavy, honest. I thought I was imagining it, I admitted. Like maybe if I just tried harder, stayed quieter, needed less. Danielle shook her head again. You could disappear entirely and it still wouldn't be enough, because this was never about you. I let out a slow breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. So what did you do? I asked. I stopped chasing their approval, she said simply. Stopped explaining, stopped hoping holidays would be different. It hurt at first, then it felt like freedom. Eli tugged my sleeve. Can we go to the park? I smiled down at him. Not today, honey, but soon. Danielle watched us, her eyes glistening. He's a good kid. He deserves better, I said before I could stop myself. She nodded, so do you. I looked back at the house one last time. The porch light flickered on, even though it wasn't dark yet. A reflex, appear welcoming without actually being warm. I'm done trying to make them love him, I said quietly. Or me. Danielle reached out and squeezed my arm. That's not giving up, that's choosing yourself. I nodded, something steady settling in my chest. Hey, she added, if you ever need someone to show up, really show up, call me. I will, I said. And for the first time I believed it. We walked to the car together. When I buckled Eli in, he looked up at me and asked, is she nice? Yes, I said, closing the door gently. She is. As I pulled away, Danielle stood on the porch, rain misting around her, watching us go, not with judgment, not with pity, with understanding. And that made all the difference. The next morning, I let the sun wake us. No alarms, no rush, just the soft rustle of Eli's feet dragging across the carpet as he padded into my room, his stuffed dinosaur trailing behind him like a shadow. Mommy, he said, climbing under the covers, can we go see the ducks today? It wasn't a complicated request, and maybe that's why it felt like such a relief. Yeah, buddy, I murmured, pulling him close. We can go see the ducks. We packed peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices into his dinosaur lunchbox, and I tossed a blanket into the trunk just in case we decided to stay a while. There was no plan. I didn't want one. I just wanted to be somewhere I could breathe again. City Park wasn't fancy, patchy grass, cracked sidewalks, and a handful of picnic tables that always seemed just a little uneven. But the pond was real, and the ducks didn't care if you were tired or sad or quietly rebuilding your life one soft step at a time. Eli skipped ahead on the path, his arms flapping like wings, calling to every duck like they were old friends. His joy was unbothered, uncomplicated. I sat down on the damp bench near the water, my coat tucked under me, and just watched him. The air was crisp, bright but not warm. Somewhere behind me, someone was jogging with earbuds in. Further up the path, a couple argued quietly over stroller snacks. Normal things, neutral, free from judgment. Eli came back and sat beside me, cheeks pink and eyes wide. "Can we live here, Mommy?" I smiled. "At the park," he nodded with the utmost seriousness. "We can sleep on the blanket, and ducks can be our pets." "I like that plan," I said, "but only if you promise to keep the ducks out of the kitchen." He laughed, tossing his apple slice to the nearest waddling spectator. We stayed there for hours. Talking. Not talking, just being. I didn't think about my parents. I didn't think about Caleb. I didn't even think about the $3 I'd sent like a final act of protest. I thought about this moment. His fingers sticky from fruit juice, his voice narrating the ducks' imaginary names, Commander Quack, Sir Splash, and one he insisted was called Chicken Duck. I'd spent so long trying to patch up broken family lines, keeping Eli connected to people who barely remembered his birthday. I wanted him to have roots. A wider village. A grandmother to read him stories, a grandfather to cheer from the sidelines. But the cost was too high, too hollow. He didn't need people who only showed up when it was convenient for them. He needed people who stayed. And right now, that was me. "Hey," I said, gently brushing a crumb from his cheek. "You know what?" "What?" "You and me, buddy." I paused, letting the words settle in. "That's the only team that matters now." He leaned into me without hesitation, his tiny head pressing against my arm. "We're a good team," he mumbled, "better than good, I thought." We watched the sun dip lower, the ducks drifting lazily across the water. I felt something loosen inside my chest, not forgiveness, not closure, just a soft kind of surrender. To what is, not what should have been. When we finally packed up, Eli held my hand tightly as we walked back to the car, our shadows long on the pavement. "Can we come back tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes," I said, meaning it. "And maybe the next day too." The next morning began the way all the best ones do, quiet, calm, with the smell of cinnamon toast in the air and the faint sound of cartoons humming from the living room. Eli sat cross-legged on the rug, balancing his plastic dinosaurs in a carefully staged battle scene. I stood by the stove, flipping French toast and thinking, just for a moment, that things might finally settle into something like peace. I should have known it wouldn't last. The knock came hard and fast, too early and too urgent to be a neighbor. 3 bangs, then silence. I wiped my hands on the dish-towel, heart ticking faster. Eli didn't look up. He made a little explosion noise with his mouth, completely unaware that the air in the house had changed. I opened the door. 2 uniformed officers stood on the porch. The taller one stepped forward, eyes flicking briefly toward the window behind me. "Marissa Holloway." "Yes." He didn't hesitate. "We have a warrant. There's been a report of child endangerment. We're here to take your son into temporary protective custody." Everything stopped. The words hit like ice water down my spine. I blinked, certain I'd misunderstood. "Wait, what?" my voice cracked. This is a mistake. What are you talking about?" The other officer, a woman with a tight bun and tired eyes, held up a printed document inside a plastic sleeve. "The report was submitted anonymously," she said. "But due to the nature of the allegation, Child Protective Services authorized a removal while the case is reviewed." I stepped halfway out onto the porch, my hand instinctively on the doorframe as if anchoring myself. "There has never been anything to report," I said, struggling to stay steady. "I'm his mother. I've never hurt my child." "We understand this is upsetting," the woman said, softer now. "But the process has already been set in motion. You'll receive further instructions after the evaluation." "No, wait, he's 4, he's just a baby, he doesn't even understand what's happening, you can't take him." "Mommy." Eli's voice from behind me was small. Frightened. He stood in the hallway in his pajamas, holding Commander Quack in one hand, eyes wide as he looked from me to the officers. I turned, dropped to my knees in front of him. "Hey, it's okay, everything's going to be okay," I said quickly, voice trembling. "These people are here, but this isn't forever, all right, Mommy's going to fix it." His lower lip began to quiver. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong, this is not your fault." I hugged him so tight I could feel his heartbeat racing. One of the officers stepped forward. "I'm sorry, ma'am, it's time." No, please. Let me at least get him dressed. Can I talk to someone, a caseworker, anyone?" "They'll contact you within 24 hours, the woman said. "I'm truly sorry." I stood slowly, still holding Eli, his arms wrapped tightly around my neck. When I tried to put him down, he wouldn't let go. "Mommy, no, don't make me go." The sound of his scream will haunt me forever. "I will get you back," I whispered into his hair. "I promise you, Eli, I promise." The officer gently but firmly took him from my arms. Eli kicked and sobbed, reaching for me even as they buckled him into the backseat of the unmarked SUV parked in front of the house. I followed them outside barefoot, arms crossed over my chest against the cold. He pressed his little hand against the window, tears streaking down his face. The male officer nodded once at me before they pulled away. I stood on the sidewalk long after the car disappeared down the street. The neighborhood was quiet. Peaceful, someone was mowing their lawn across the street. A delivery truck passed by without slowing, as if my entire world hadn't just been ripped from my arms. Eventually, I went back inside and closed the door behind me. The cartoons were still playing. The toast was burning, and Eli's stuffed dinosaur lay face down on the rug, right where he'd left it. The chair was cold and bolted to the floor. My palms pressed against the steel table, sticky with leftover anxiety from the ride over. A single overhead light buzzed faintly above me, flickering just enough to set my nerves further on edge. A half-empty styrofoam cup of water sat in front of me. I hadn't touched it. I couldn't. The door opened without warning. A man stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered in a slate-gray suit. He moved with the deliberate stillness of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. He set a thin file on the table and closed the door behind him with a heavy click. "Marissa Holloway?" he asked, though we both knew the answer. I nodded. He didn't sit right away, just opened the file and studied the papers inside, flipping slowly like he had all the time in the world. Eventually, he looked up. "I'm Detective Granger," he said. "I'm the lead on your case." "My case," I repeated, the words sour in my mouth. What is this even about? Why is my son? Why is Eli gone? I don't understand what's happening." Granger finally sat, folding his hands over the file. His expression didn't soften. "There's been an anonymous tip," he said. "A claim of emotional endangerment, unstable home environment, repeated verbal outbursts, witness accounts of aggressive behavior around your child." My stomach dropped. "That's not true." He tilted his head as if considering the lie. "You have no history of domestic violence. No CPS reports, that's good. But we received footage dated 3 days ago." He tapped his keyboard, and the monitor beside him blinked to life. A video began to play. It was me, on the front porch of my parents' house. Danielle must have filmed it. No, not Danielle, someone else. From behind a window across the street, I watched myself on screen, jaw clenched, voice sharp as I confronted my parents. The video didn't include their snide remarks. No context, just my raised voice, my pointed finger. The moment I turned away, face flushed, and Eli looked up at me uncertainly. Granger paused the video right there. "This," he said, "is what we received." I couldn't breathe. That was a fight, a private argument with my parents. That's not abuse, that's not endangerment. "Your son is present, observing. You appear agitated, uncontrolled." "Because they ignored his birthday," I snapped. "Because they've done this to me my entire life and I finally stood up to them. That's not instability, that's survival." He leaned back in his chair. "Then help me understand," he said, his tone neutral but edged. "Help me understand what kind of mother raises her voice like this with a 4-year-old watching." I felt my throat close. "A mother who has been pushed beyond the edge," I whispered. "Who's been holding it together for 4 years with no partner, no family, no support. Who planned a birthday party and watched every guest not show up. Who makes peanut butter sandwiches while fighting to hold her dignity together in courtrooms she never asked to enter." My voice broke, but I didn't stop. "I love my son. I've only loved my son. Everything I do is for him. I talk to his teachers, I read him stories every night, I've worked nights and weekends just so he could have shoes that fit and a roof over his head. And now because I snapped at my parents, because I raised my voice once, you're saying I'm unfit." Granger studied me. I wiped at my cheeks, furious at the tears falling whether I liked it or not. "I was defending Eli," I said. "I was defending myself, that's all." He looked at the screen again, then back at me. "We'll review the full context," he said finally. "You'll be contacted by CPS for a follow-up evaluation. In the meantime, your son will remain in temporary custody." I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table and tear the screen down and shout at the top of my lungs that I wouldn't let them take him without a fight. But I didn't, because I knew that would be the final nail. So instead, I sat back. I breathed through the burning. And I stared right into Detective Granger's unreadable face. Then review everything, I said, voice shaking. Because if you really see us, me and Eli, you'll know the truth. He didn't respond. He just stood, closed the file, and walked out, leaving me alone in that freezing room with a styrofoam cup and a broken heart. I didn't remember the drive home. I must have taken the same route I always did. Same traffic lights. Same cracked sidewalks lining the road near our block. But when I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine, it felt like waking up underwater. The porch light flicked on automatically. Eli's little rain boots were still by the door, one tipped over like he'd kicked it off mid-run. His backpack was hanging on the hook. His artwork, finger-painted blobs and lopsided hearts, was still pinned to the fridge with alphabet magnets. Everything in the house screamed of him, but the silence was louder. I walked in and shut the door behind me with more force than necessary. The sound echoed across the living room like a slap. His stuffed dinosaur, still where he dropped it 2 days ago, stared up at me with blank button eyes. I dropped my bag, sat on the couch, stared at the toys scattered across the rug, little green army men, a cracked puzzle box, his favorite flashlight shaped like a rocket, and in the middle of it all, the empty spot where he always curled up to watch cartoons with his blanket. The grief hit in waves. The first one was sharp and immediate, choking, breathless. I bent forward, face in my hands, not even trying to stop the sobs. "He's not here," I whispered, as if saying it out loud would help me understand it better. They took him, they took him." I didn't know how long I stayed like that. Eventually the tears slowed, but they didn't bring relief. Only exhaustion. I stood, went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water I didn't want. I stared at the half-used juice box still sitting on the counter from breakfast. I picked it up, pressed it to my lips. Still sweet, still cold, still Eli, and suddenly, like lightning behind my eyes, I saw it all clearly. The video, the timing, the anonymous report, the fact that it surfaced days after the confrontation at my parents' house, but only moments after I pushed back. The callousness of Caleb's rest request. The cold dismissal from my father. The way my mother said, "He's 4. He won't remember." They weren't just cruel, they were intentional. "They set me up," I said out loud, the glass shaking in my hand. Of course they did, they'd always wanted control. And when guilt didn't work, when manipulation didn't work, this was their next move. Something bigger, something that would finally shut me up. I left the glass in the sink, walked back into the living room, sat down again. Slower this time. Quieter. I looked around at Eli's world, blocks under the coffee table, his tiny sock poking out from behind the couch cushion, a book on the armrest with a sticky note where I'd stopped mid-sentence the night before. Every inch of this house was proof that I loved him, that I raised him, that I showed up. And they were trying to erase that, to make me look unstable, unsafe, to punish me for walking away from their chaos, for saying, "You don't get to hurt us anymore." I pressed my hand to my forehead and let the cold fury settle. Not loud, not explosive, still like a match before the spark. "I'm not going to fight them," I said quietly, almost to myself. Not yet. Because this wasn't about one visit from CPS. This was a war. A quiet, deliberate war of image and narrative, and I wasn't going to run into battle with my fists swinging and my voice raised, because that's what they wanted. They wanted me to scream, to break, to fulfill their story. "They want to break me," I said through clenched teeth. "But I will make them regret this. Not today, but soon." I turned off the lights one by one, gathered Eli's toys and placed them gently in the bin by the wall. I folded his little blue blanket and laid it on the couch, brushed the crumbs from his coloring table. I didn't want him to come back to a mess, because he would come back. I'd already lost too much. And I wasn't going to lose him too. I hadn't slept much the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Eli crying as they took him from me. I'd reach out, desperate to feel the weight of him beside me in bed, but the space stayed cold. Empty. So when the knock came again the next evening, I was already sitting at the kitchen table, fully dressed, hands wrapped around a mug of tea I'd reheated twice and never sipped. This knock was softer. Still firm, but without that sharp, cold certainty from the day before. I stood and opened the door. Detective Granger was on my porch again, this time without his jacket, sleeves rolled up, clipboard under one arm. He looked tired. "Ms. Holloway," he said, voice more human than yesterday. "Do you have a moment?" I nodded, stepping aside. "You're not taking anything else from me, are you?" There was no edge in my tone, just weariness. I didn't have the energy to armor up again. No, he replied. This is just a follow-up home assessment. Standard protocol during temporary placement reviews. He walked in slowly, like he didn't want to startle the silence. His eyes scanned the room, the clean couch, the tidy floors, the shelves lined with kids' books, alphabet magnets still clinging crookedly to the fridge. There was no mess to hide. I hadn't touched anything except to straighten it. Granger paused at the little dry erase board hanging beside the hallway. Eli's learning board. On it in bright colors, I'd drawn a smiley sun and written out his daily routine in block letters. 8:00, breakfast 9:00, letters practice 10:00, outside time 1:00, nap 3:00, story time 6:00, dinner and dance party. He ran his fingers just above the surface but didn't touch. You wrote this? He asked. Every week, I said. He likes knowing what comes next. It makes him feel safe. Granger turned to face me fully for the first time. His gaze was steady but not cold like before. I spoke to several of your neighbors today, he said. The couple next door, the woman across the street, mail carrier too. My stomach fluttered. They said you shovel your walk even when it's not snowing yet, that you check on the elderly woman in Unit 4 when her son doesn't visit, that you're always with Eli, that you talk to him like he's a person, not just a kid. I said nothing, just nodded once, swallowing the lump in my throat. They said he's bright, kind, always clean and well-dressed. Never seen bruises, never heard yelling unless it was giggles from the backyard during a sprinkler war. I let out the smallest breath of relief. Then his expression changed just slightly. Less rigid, still professional but softened at the edges. Ms. Holloway, he said, when I watched that footage yesterday, I saw a woman yelling. A woman in distress. And I've been doing this long enough to know that's usually only half the story. It was, I said quietly. It was a fight, but it wasn't who I am. I know, he replied. The room fell quiet. He glanced again at the board, then down at the bin of toys neatly arranged beside the couch. I'll be submitting my full report to CPS tomorrow, he said. I can't predict the timing, but if things continue to line up the way they are, you'll be hearing good news. I studied him for a long moment. He hadn't apologized, but something in his tone, his posture said enough. There was still a wall between us, but now I could see where it ended. Thank you, I murmured, for looking past the surface. He gave a faint nod and turned to go, his clipboard tucked back under his arm. As he reached the door, I stopped him. Detective, he looked over his shoulder. You said you've done this a long time. Do people ever make it through all this? Come out okay? He considered the question for a beat. Some do, he said, usually the ones who don't give up. I held his gaze. I'm not giving up, he nodded. Then maybe there's still some truth left in this world. And then he was gone. I closed the door behind him, stood with my back against it for a moment and let the silence wrap around me, not sharp this time, but steady. Something had shifted. I didn't know if it was enough. But I knew I wasn't crazy. I wasn't alone in the truth. And that meant something. It meant everything. I didn't sleep that night either. But it wasn't fear that kept me up this time. It was something quieter, steadier, like holding your breath under still water, afraid to surface, afraid to believe you'll find air when you do. The courthouse smelled like floor polish and nerves. Eli's favorite sweatshirt was folded inside my bag. I didn't know if I'd get to see him, if he'd even be in the room, but I brought it anyway. I needed something of his clothes to me, something warm. I sat in the front row of the courtroom, palms flat against my skirt, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the chatter. Then the door opened, and in walked Detective Granger. His expression was unreadable as ever, but when he glanced at me, his nod was just a fraction slower. Intentional. He took the stand with the same steady presence he'd brought into my home. But this time, his voice was different. Firm, yes, but grounded in something closer to truth. In my professional assessment, he said, the living environment at Ms. Holloway's residence is stable, safe, and centered on the well-being of her son. I conducted 2 visits, spoke with multiple neighbors, and found no indicators of abuse or neglect. The CPS representative beside him nodded in agreement. The footage submitted as part of the anonymous complaint was taken without context, during a private family argument, and was not reflective of the child's day-to-day conditions. Granger paused. In fact, every person I spoke to described Ms. Holloway as a protective, attentive, and loving mother. My throat tightened. Across the aisle, my parents weren't there. Of course they weren't. When the truth is coming, people like them vanish first. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, adjusted her glasses and looked straight at me. "Ms. Holloway," she said, "we see no reason for your son to remain in temporary custody. Effective immediately, he will be returned to your care." A gasp slipped from me before I could stop it. A bailiff opened the side door and then, "Mommy." Eli barreled across the room, arms flung wide, cheeks flushed. I dropped to my knees just in time to catch him, holding him so tightly I was afraid I might break him or myself. His little fingers tangled in my sweater. "I missed you. I missed you more," I whispered, tears slipping down my face, not from pain this time, but from something almost foreign. Relief. When I finally looked up, Granger had stepped down from the witness stand. I met him halfway, still holding Eli close. "Thank you," I said, voice low, "for seeing me when no one else would." He hesitated for just a beat, then replied, "I'm just doing my job." But there was something behind his eyes. The judge cleared her throat. "Additionally," she said, turning pages in her file, "we are opening a formal defamation investigation into the origin of the false report." My breath caught. And just like that, the tide began to turn. I didn't expect to feel calm. But as I stepped into the courtroom, Eli's small hand tucked tightly into mine, I felt something settle inside me, like a storm had passed, and all that was left now was the debris and the truth. They were already seated. My mother sat rigid, her face pulled into that tight, familiar scowl of disapproval. My father leaned back in his chair like he owned the bench, arms crossed, one leg bouncing with that smug confidence I'd spent my life trying not to resent. Neither looked at me, which was fine. I wasn't here to see them. I was here to be seen. The prosecutor, a woman in a maroon blazer with a voice like steel wrapped in silk, stood and faced the court. "We've reviewed digital records, surveillance timestamps, and phone call logs provided by the investigator," she said. "It is our finding that the anonymous report made against Ms. Holloway originated from the residence of Harold and Lydia Vaughn, her parents." The gallery stirred. My father's smug legs stopped bouncing. My mother's jaw tightened like a trap snapping shut. The prosecutor continued, her voice even. "The call was placed the morning following a family dispute, which we now know was recorded and selectively edited before being submitted to Child Protective Services. Metadata confirms the footage was exported from a device belonging to the Vaughns." She paused, letting it sink in. "In short, this wasn't a concerned report. It was retaliation, calculated, malicious, and it nearly destroyed a mother's life." I felt Eli shift against my leg. I rested a hand on his head, gently smoothing his curls. He didn't need to understand what was being said. He just needed to feel me steady. The judge spoke next, her tone flat and final. "Restraining orders will be filed immediately. Any future attempt to contact Ms. Holloway or her child will be considered a direct violation of this court's order." Still, not a glance from them. Not a single word. Outside, on the steps of the courthouse, the sky was overcast, but the air felt clearer than it had in weeks. Eli held my hand, chewing a gummy snack someone had given him earlier. We waited for the crowd to thin before heading home. That's when I saw them. My parents, cornering Granger near the parking lot. Their voices weren't raised, but the tension was sharp even from a distance. I could only hear fragments. "You'll regret this," my mother hissed, eyes sharp and narrowed. "We'll record everything, every word you say." Granger didn't flinch. He looked at them the way one looks at something already fading into the past. "You've already written your sentence," he said simply. Then he turned and walked away. I stood still, Eli tugging my hand, asking if we could go get ice cream. I didn't respond right away. I was too busy watching them, the people who once sat at my dinner table who held my newborn in their arms, now frozen in place, furious and powerless. I didn't smile, but I did breathe, fully, finally. Then I turned and walked away, Eli skipping beside me, their shadows shrinking behind us. The courthouse lobby felt different this time. No trembling hands, no pit in my stomach. Just the low murmur of clerks and the shuffle of papers echoing against marble floors. I waited near the wide double doors, Eli's school pickup still an hour away, sunlight slicing through the high windows like warm ribbon. Then I saw him. Detective Granger, no longer in a suit, just a button-down and worn leather jacket, walking toward me with something unfamiliar in his expression. A kind of uncertainty, almost shy. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets. "Didn't think I'd see you back here voluntarily," he said. I didn't think I'd feel safe walking through those doors again, I replied, offering a small smile. But here we are. He nodded slowly, like he wasn't entirely sure what to say next. Then, with a half step closer, he added, "Look, I know I was hard on you when we first met. You were doing your job," I said, not out of politeness but honesty. "And then you kept doing it, even when it meant seeing the truth no one else wanted to." He glanced down for a second, then looked back at me. "This isn't protocol," he said carefully. "But I wanted to ask if you'd like to maybe have dinner with me sometime." I blinked. "I mean," he added quickly, "this wasn't exactly the setting I imagined meeting someone like you. Emotional custody cases, courtroom drama, not ideal first impression material." That pulled a laugh from me, small but real. "I don't know," I said. "You saw me at my worst and didn't run away screaming. That might be worth something." He smiled, not wide but genuine. "I figured," he said, "maybe we could try again, less courtroom, more coffee." There was a long pause between us, one of those silences that felt like a choice. I thought of Eli's little hand in mine on the courthouse steps, the weight of his backpack slung over my shoulder, the quiet strength I'd had to grow just to survive. Then I looked at Granger. At the man who asked questions, but more importantly, who listened when the answers were hard. "After what you did for Eli," I said softly, "I'd be honored." We walked together down the courthouse steps. Not fast, not in any rush. The air outside was crisp, the kind of weather that makes you want to breathe deeper. People passed us on their way in and out, carrying files, phones pressed to their ears, heads bowed in urgency. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't rushing anywhere. And for once, I wasn't walking alone. The sun was high over the park, warming the benches and glinting off the silver chains of the swings. The laughter of children floated on the breeze, along with the scent of popcorn from a nearby vendor. Eli's sneakers scraped across the dirt as he shouted, "Higher, Mommy!" Legs pumping, hair wild with wind. I gave the swing another push and watched as he soared forward, letting out a gleeful howl that only 4-year-olds could perfect. Across the grass, Granger was walking back from the ice cream truck, 2 cones in hand and a cherry red smear already melting down one of them. He wasn't in a suit. Not today, just a navy t-shirt, jeans, and that worn leather jacket he refused to give up. I waved to him and he lifted the cone like a toast. We'd been coming to this park most weekends now. Not because it was the biggest or the fanciest, but because it was where I remembered how to breathe again. Where Eli learned to laugh again. "Okay, bud," I said, slowing the swing. "Ice cream time." Eli jumped off mid-swing, no fear, just complete trust that the ground would catch him. He ran straight for Granger, yelling, "Did you get the rainbow one?" "Of course," Granger said, handing him the messier cone. "Extra sprinkles, like always." I met them by the shaded picnic table. Granger handed me the second cone, this one neatly intact. "Thanks," I said, brushing my thumb across his knuckles as I took it. Give me that small, quiet smile that meant more than words. Eli was already halfway through his ice cream, a sticky smear across his cheek. He looked up at us, eyes bright. "Can we come here tomorrow too?" "Sure," I said, "as long as you don't turn into a popsicle by then." Granger sat beside me, watching Eli race toward the slide. "You ever think about how far this feels from that day?" he asked. I nodded. "Every day." Because I did. I remembered it all, the knock on the door, the courtroom. The silence in my house when Eli was gone. But it felt like another life now. Like someone else's memory I carried in my pocket. I looked around at the other families, dads chasing toddlers, moms sharing quiet laughs on blankets, grandparents handing out juice boxes. Some of them were probably blood. Some weren't. It didn't matter. "It's not blood that makes a family," I said quietly, more to myself than anyone. "It's who stands by you when everything falls apart." Granger didn't answer, but he reached for my hand under the table, lacing our fingers together. Justice gave me back my son, but love gave me something even rarer. Peace. Eli waved from the top of the slide, yelling, "Watch me." And we did, together. That was the end of my story. I still think about Danielle sometimes. The moment she stepped onto that porch and chose to speak up instead of staying silent like everyone else. If you were in her place, would you have done the same or kept walking? Tell me in the comments, because I still wonder if she changed everything. And if this story meant something to you, please like the video and subscribe. Your support helps voices like mine be heard.